Welcome to Healthcare Simplified, a podcast from Deliver Health. Nothing's inherently simple about healthcare. That's why on Healthcare Simplified, we explore with today's top health leaders how to maximize ROI, staff satisfaction, and public health outcomes by building greater efficiencies into the healthcare connections that matter most between clinicians and technology, providers and patients, and people and their health. I'm your host, Mitch Holdwick. Let's put simplicity to work together. Welcome from Shishmid. We've been here all week, super excited. We've had a lot of great guests and thought leaders that have been here at the conference, and I'm especially excited for today's guest, somebody that I've had a chance to get to know over the years and connect with. We've got Jessica Walker, founder and CEO of Care Sherpa, with us today. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mitch. I'm a pleasure to be here.
And a little background. Is it okay if I go through your bio?
Please. Thank you. I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, let me see how I do. So for over 15 years, Jessica has been consulting with healthcare organizations and providers to support patient and employee engagement strategies, from predictive analytics, marketing strategies, CRM, digital engagement, population health, and patient portals. Jessica supported multiple healthcare organizations on their patient acquisition and retention journeys. Her passion for helping healthcare business leaders align data analytics, technology, strategies, and operational resources to drive significant business outcomes was how Care Sherpa was born. How did I do?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good?
Yeah, that's pretty spot on.
I will say, and you do live in Nashville.
I do.
So I want to drop that as well, but I'm particularly interested in your organization and what you do at Care Sherpa. So I think that'd be a great place to start, and kind of the passion that is really fed in your work. So tell our listeners a little more.
Well, thank you, Mitch. Really, it was born out of my history, as you mentioned, with CRM and patient acquisition and patient portals, ultimately helping organizations think through their patient strategies. The biggest opportunity gap that I saw is in that last mile, right? Working with marketing partners, they spend so much time and energy and money trying to generate these high value, high elective procedure patients, only to have it completely fall apart when it comes to the time the patient picks up the phone or fills out the web form. And looking in the landscape, I really didn't see anyone that was addressing that issue in particular, because we know that many organizations can't invest in a large call center team, or maybe don't have the ability to really micro focus on these very important, we'll call them like red carpet VIP type patients, right? That can make or break your profitability. So that's where Care Sherpa comes in. We manage that last mile for the patient in high margin elective areas. Think of it as a combination between care navigation, care concierge, white glove level service. It was really born out of what we didn't mention in my background is I started my career in hospitality, right? From a hospitality perspective, your VIP, your top tier guests, you know everything about them. You know how to roll out the red carpet. And I just saw that, again, everyone's marketing to these same patients, right? And if you're in a competitive market, your neighbor facility maybe can outspend you when it comes to the marketing tactics and strategies, but you can outsmart them if you elevate your experience through a competitive advantage with a higher end patient pathway, making it very frictionless. So long way of saying that's why Care Sherpa was born.
That's awesome. I like what you said about the focus. Like sometimes it's a issue of lack of resources, but also the inability to really have what was the word you used?
Micro focus.
Micro focus, yeah.
And so you think about this outside of healthcare, right? Also, I've been in other industries where your new customer, right? You think about banking. How many times they give you a promo like, oh, if you open if you're a new customer credit card, you get the toaster, whatever. Right. So in healthcare, though, this idea of this new patient acquisition focus and how do we make sure we really capitalize on that, from managing the pipeline and, dare I say, the dirty word of sales, because that's what we're talking about is this new, sales experience. So truly, this opportunity to step in and help assist them with clearing the path. We, Care Sherpa, become the Wizard of Oz, right? That all this stuff is happening behind the curtain. Your new patient doesn't have to experience that. We just help them feel like they're on the yellow brick road. Yeah,
I love that. And I think as I'm listening to you, I'm harken back to kind of a mantra that we use, and I think we've heard a lot at Shishmid, that innovation sometimes happens in the process, not just the technology. And I think
100%.
When I think about what you do, that really is so true.
And you bring up the idea too, and another concept that I talk about is that I know our healthcare partners have a lot of issues with access, right? Access is really tough, that our marketing friends are pushed to build volume and get, growth at, this additional support, but then that ability to they can't operationally fix the process, right? They don't own operations. So again, concept being that you may not be able to fix the macro, but if you can get micro and say, okay, for these very strategic service lines that are going to make or break our profitability, let's make sure that we take care of that.
And maybe too, in that spirit of kind of, recognizing the operational disjointedness and silo mentality we're all aware of, this is an opportunity for marketers to show some value and start connecting that bridge to operations.
And it is, and what we find with our new partners especially is the data that we can collect to bring things to bear are usually the canary in the coal mine of other things happening, right?
Yeah.
But to demonstrate that, so I'll give you a great example. We worked with a health system in their bariatric program, and we saw immediately that they had a capacity issue, right? They had more demand. Even when they shut marketing off, they still had a significant demand in this area. And it wasn't until we were able to quantify for them, like literally -50 patients with insurance ready to go every month.
Wow.
And because they didn't have the right capacity. And so demonstration, then the marketing team looks like, the amazing partner to bring that data up and say, hey, is it time for us to add new providers? Or, hey, can we add maybe a different way of doing business? Like, let's bring in mid-level providers who can maybe start with this first patient appointment and thus be able to help us, create that pathway.
I can't think of a more powerful way to empower marketers, who historically haven't had a seat at the table. I love that example. So let's talk a little bit about, I know you presented at Shishmit, and a reminder to all of our listeners that the content will be on demand. So I encourage you to go back and check out Jessica's session. The topic was growing profitable elective procedure volume. That is a juicy one. I would love to hear a little bit, maybe some highlights for our listeners.
That's kind of what we've been talking about, actually. Yeah. And I shared some examples of, even if you can't have a Care Sherpa, how can you, create this frictionless opportunity for these high margin elective areas? So some of the things we talked about were, there's very simple things you can do. I know that many of our marketing friends, they can't control operations. They can't bring in new FTEs. So we talked about being able to simplify it down. So using the example, we work with many organizations that have an HRA or other type of content tools that engage the prospective patient. We have found in our research that the patients that interact with your content, their likelihood to convert is at least 53% higher.
Wow.
And so therefore, if your team can do nothing else, then are they making sure every single day we're following up with those who've engaged with the content? And thus being able to help move that through.
That takes a lot of, I would imagine, compassion and obsession to really stay on top of folks at that part of the journey.
And we also talked about how some of the simple things, and we use the example, I worked with a health system that they had a marketing coordinator for these strategic service lines where they had them follow up with patients that had come through to say, what was your experience? Or, kind of post-consult to see how it went, just to gather that service recovery as well. And that made a significant difference in their overall conversion.
Yeah, kind of letting the operations and data drive decisions and changes. That's really cool. So let's take a step back. I know the focus for our show is healthcare simplified, and there's a big focus, of course, in digital health overall. We hear so much about that, and the momentum is undeniable. But what are a couple areas where you've seen some progress in this space and within the industry?
Well, I think it's interesting that we are starting to see, we'll call it the outside influence, right? So different practices from other industries and other spaces starting to come in. So I see this with the rise of business development directors for health systems, right? I find that very intriguing. And they become my people, like in terms of we can speak the same language when we talk about sales pipelines, right? But what I see that becomes very intriguing with this rise is that they're working hand in hand with sales and marketing and with the marketing team, right? And turning into a sales and marketing kind of dynamic duo. But ultimately, what the business development individuals also bring to bear is a lot of great data around what's happening in the market. So another area that we've seen is, we'll call it the full utilization of technology tools. I've been in this space for 15 years, and there's lots of kind of call it silver bullet syndrome, right? That, if I just get this chatbot or if I just get this new tool, it's going to solve all of my volume issues. And I think what's interesting is that some of those, we'll call them fads, have come and gone,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
Because ultimately that it doesn't always demonstrate true return. However, what I do find interesting is that some of these now are being applied in new and unique ways. So for an example, part of a complicated patient journey, giving them an assisted tool, right, that promotes different nurturing and different follow-ups with it not being human powered, does make a difference.
Yeah. Those are great examples. So as far as there's areas where we've seen progress, but of course there are so many opportunities and challenges. What are 2 or 3 of your top barriers that we're facing right now?
What I have seen, this is really in the last, let's say 6 to 9 months, but it's really gotten more pronounced in the last 3 months even. And it goes both terms of benefit to my organization, but also, with my partners, is the rise with employee turnover. And so one of the trends that we're seeing, that burnout and resiliency, right, is at its all-time lowest in healthcare at the moment. And because of that, some of these folks who, have stuck through the pandemic and have gotten to that point are now just at this breaking point, right, and not feeling they can breathe. And I see this very prevalent with some of my marketing partners and their service lines. So they've got a great campaign, but then they don't have any of the front support staff to get that through, right? So the trend, what we're seeing is that for the first time, it feels like many organizations who were closed off to outsourced partners now have to be open to it. So organizations I talked to in 2019 who closed the door said, no, we could never work with an outside partner to be in our EMR scheduling or to talk to our patients on our behalf, are now coming back around and saying, I can't keep this service line area staffed. What can you do to help support us?
Interesting. And actually, as you're talking, I really like how you talk about your marketing partners. And I think that's such a critical piece, and I really appreciate that. So how does that, talk about that a little bit in terms of how you think of your, some people may say clients, but truly as your partners?
Oh, absolutely. My entire career, whether it's Care Sherpa and prior, but I always think about it in this context, which is I bring to bear, you have a problem. There's a pain that you're feeling. And if I know the solution or I can help support you in that solution, we call it that service heart. So as I select my team members, we look for people that have this, but you're just drawn to, work together on a solution. So I say from a partner, because I'm not brought in just to make the cash register ring and make patients show up, right? I'm brought in because they want to improve the patient experience. They want to solve a revenue problem. They want to, whatever the case may be, but it's not as simple as just flipping a switch, right? So if we're in deep partnership where I understand the dynamics of your organization, I understand maybe why you can or cannot do, different strategies, then I can also bring to bear other partners that I know that can fix your solution. And I use this as an example. Sometimes we're confused with a call center and we're not that. But I also can help them, and I've more than once where maybe it is time for a larger outsourced call center partner. Great. I've got great introductions I can make for you if people I've worked with in the past.
So talk about, I feel like, you referred to your team members as Sherpas, right? So talk a little bit about your process for bringing on Sherpas, recruiting, hiring, because I know it's a pretty unique skill set.
It is. Well, it really comes out of my history. Prior to really getting into healthcare patient acquisition, early in my career, worked for the Gallup organization and learned selection science. So many of your listeners may be familiar with Gallup Strengths Finder as an example.
Sure.
There's another significant science around how you can ask predictive questions to people during the hiring process, and then that can predict whether or not, they're a good fit for the role. And so we employ solutions such as this predictive interviewing, in addition to, so use the example, we have probably about a 60-day selection talent pipeline. I use a pipeline tool for my team members, the same that I do for my clients, patients, because it's not just I have an acquisition or an opportunity and I hire someone. We're looking for someone that fits the culture. We're looking for somebody that has the service heart that I talked about earlier. But then the other unique thing that we do on purpose is that the service lines that we support, let's say bariatric, orthopedic, I will search for someone that they themselves have had the procedure.
Oh, wow.
Many times working with a client partner, I'll go into their market and try to find their former patient as well. Or ask them, hey, do you have a patient who's a raving fan that we could, talk to and see if they want to help other patients? And so that's a big part of our secret sauce, if you will, about how, but then you combine that with, I'm sure when you come by my booth and you see online, we're just fun.
Yeah.
We have fun. We're in this alpaca, kind of call it the alpaca pack.
Love it.
But it comes down to being able to create an environment where people who are called to serve can do that, and every day create a relationship with a patient.
Yeah. It makes me think about, I've worked in the hospital health system space, as you know, and one of my favorite definitions of mercy is the willingness to enter into the chaos of another. And I think about that when you talk about your work.
Yeah.
So what does that mean to you and your team?
Well, one of our mottos is that if you're doing the right thing by the patient, then you're doing the right thing, right? So meaning in the fact that there are times that we have to make a decision call that we haven't gotten the guardrails from the client partner yet, but we know what's the right thing for the patient.
Yeah.
And so then we'll always kind of put that patient perspective first, right? And there's been times where for us, that means that, we've also had to direct the patient to another organization because we didn't have the services that they needed, right? Mm-hmm. But even that, we created a positive impact on that patient from the time that we touched them.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one of our core philosophies. And we've seen that. We work in hospice as an example, right?
Yeah.
And many times when we're talking to prospective patients, unfortunately, they may not be qualified for hospice or may not be in the service area that our client works within.
Sure.
But then we're going to stay with them and find them that next place and do that warm support and that warm transfer. So I guess I would boil that down to the human to human connection that to us becomes the most important.
That's awesome. We hear so much of the, digital aspects and digital health, but I think we too often miss kind of that human connection component. So it's refreshing to hear somebody committed to it.
Somebody had said when I launched the company, they're like, oh, you're bringing the person back into personalization of healthcare. And I was like, that kind of fits.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, as you talked about in my bio and background, like I'm a big tech person. You absolutely, I call it the example at the grocery store, right? Where you got self-checkout. Definitely. I'm the girl that goes through self-checkout 99% of the time. Always. I know what I need. Let's go. However, if I want to buy a $1,000 bottle of wine, I'm going to want to talk to someone to understand, is this good? And what do I pair it with? And how do I proceed? Yeah. And that's kind of my belief too, is that we become a wonderful tap on into the ecosystem.
Sure.
We're not a replacement for technology. We're a wonderful additive. And so many times with my client partners, we'll let those help them optimize the frictionless pathway that happens for people who are ready to go, but then also for those that need that support and service and, follow up with them.
That's great. I'm surprised you have $1,000 bottles of wine in your house too.
I mean, Nashville.
That's how you guys roll.
That's big time.
Well, Jessica, this has been so much fun. And I know before we wrap up, I'm sure our listeners would love to connect with you. What's the best way they can connect?
I appreciate you asking. So very active on LinkedIn. Would love to share with any outsides. Looking to, just as a quick plug, we'll be releasing some more data into later this year around some of the insights we see with the patient experience.
Excellent.
So LinkedIn is a great place, as well as on Twitter. But follow Care Sherpa. We'd love to connect.
Sounds like a good part 2 to talk about the data. Maybe we'll have you back. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks again for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please share, rate, and review on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting platform. For more content about simplifying healthcare, visit deliverhealth.com/resources, where you'll find our blog, videos, and much more. We'll see you next time on Healthcare Simplified.